Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Josie's Point of View, where we focus on human interest stories from the Carolinas and beyond. Today it's Sunday and it's January the 2nd, 2022. Happy New Year to each of you, and thank you so much for tuning in. If you're new to my channel, I'd like to extend to you a warm welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you find the information here to be informative. And if you're a returning viewer, by all means, thank you for coming back. You know, I always say that the tide changes so frequently here on these YouTube streets. So you need to always acknowledge where your support comes from. And I want you to know I sincerely thank you for your support. Feel free to like and to share this video. And don't forget to subscribe. Thank you. So I wanted to start the new year off by doing something different, something special, and I'm calling this my special New Year's edition. So before we move into 2022, I thought it would be nice, well, just a nice gesture to look back and remember. Just to take a few minutes, I wanted to pay tribute to all of the service members in North Carolina we lost in 2021. Now, on January the 3rd, we woke up to this breaking news. It read, "Soldier from North Carolina found dead in barracks at Fort Bliss, Texas on New Year's Eve." That soldier was identified as 19-year-old Private First Class Asia Graham, hometown Cherryville, North Carolina. I did a few videos on this story last year because Asia Graham's situation really highlighted just how poorly the Army treats victims of sexual assault. She had to live day after day after day in the same environment, coming in contact with the individual she accused of sexually assaulting her. And when she complained about it, her cadre told her to shut up and stop complaining. Yes, her leadership told her to shut up and stop complaining. And that individual that she accused went on and committed other sexual assaults before he was eventually arrested and charged. In April, we learned of the death of another soldier, and the news headline read, "Paratrooper dies during parachute training accident." That soldier was identified as Army Specialist Abigail Rose Jenks, age 20, from hometown Wilton, New York. We suspected that something went terribly wrong on that static line, but the full story was never disclosed by Fort Bragg. However, this past September, an article published by the Times-Union, it shared her mother's story as the mother reluctantly shared some of the details by filling in the gaps about what happened the day her daughter died. And since mom was comfortable sharing those details, we are repeating what was published by the Times-Union. And according to that report, her mother stated that her daughter's parachute opened just fine. However, she had a very hard landing and was knocked unconscious. And while she was passed out, the wind came up behind her and dragged her, and the string from the parachute wrapped around her neck, and she was unable to breathe. And that is how she died. I'm sure that information was difficult for mom to share, but mom, I acknowledge you and I thank you for sharing. And in May, we saw another sad headline, and it read, "Fort Bragg soldier murdered by another soldier." The deceased soldier was identified as 22-year-old Army Sergeant Kelia Horton, a native of Hueytown, Alabama. The full story was never really disclosed, but we know that her shooting took place in the driveway of a male acquaintance, someone who was known to Specialist Horton and the woman who shot her. That woman is also a military service member, but we have decided not to mention her name in this review, and her picture will also not be shown. And in June, around the middle of the month, we had bad news. We first heard about this passing of a soldier who was killed in an accident. We learned that Army Corporal Mojave Littlejohn, age 21, of Roseville, Michigan, was killed in a traffic wreck on Fort Bragg. Reports say he was driving a truck in a military caravan heading to a training range. And I wanted to acknowledge his accomplishments, because he is accomplished not only in physical fitness, but as a powerlifter. And it's simply because I am also a professional powerlifter, and I understand the hard work that goes into preparing and competing. And that was what he had done, or what he was doing, was above and beyond what was expected of him as a paratrooper. You see, I just told you something about myself you never knew before. But there was more bad news on the horizon. Just around that same time, we learned that two paratroopers were found dead in their barracks on Fort Bragg. The first was identified as Specialist Joshua James Diamond, age 35, hometown is Plymouth, Mass. And the second deceased soldier was 20-year-old Army First Class Matthew Disney, where his hometown is Aberdeen, Maryland. Now we're still in the month of June, and around the end of the month, we learned that our Camp Lejeune family had also suffered a significant loss. The news headline read, Camp Lejeune Marine struck and killed by a drunk driver while jogging. This Marine was identified as an up-and-coming young first lieutenant who had aspirations of becoming a judge. She was 26-year-old First Lieutenant Justice Stewart, a native of Columbia, South Carolina. This is a tragic story because of the punishment the drunk driver received. It just seemed a bit unbelievable. I have to acknowledge that I initially missed the story when it first took place because it was never publicized in my area, but I plan to go back and cover this entire story later this month. August was probably the worst month we had last year because there was just so much pain and suffering, so much tragedy and pain, not just here in the Carolinas, but throughout the nation. But I want to share what we experienced. First, we learned that a native daughter, one of our Air Force heroes, had suddenly died in Kuwait. She was Air Force Chief Master Sergeant Tracy Seneck King, age 54, hometown Rayford, North Carolina, just up the street. We're so very proud of her. And the tragedy here is that she had served her country with distinction and was at the end point of her career. She was just 3 months away from planning her retirement. In August, we also learned of another paratrooper's death. The headline read, Paratrooper found dead in his Fort Bragg barracks. That paratrooper was identified as 29-year-old Private First Class Mikhail Rubino, a native of Oroville, California. He died around, I believe it was on August the 13th. We don't know how he died, and we're not going to speculate. But there was more tragedy for the Carolinas family in the month of August, and we learned that 2 North Carolina service members were among the 13 casualties from the Afghan airport bombing. This is a picture that would stay with me for a very, very long time because when I saw it, I cringed and it reminded me of the price of protecting this nation. These are the coffins of the 13 service members who were killed in that bombing in Afghanistan. And despite our prayers and our desire that Fort Bragg would not be impacted in any way, we saw this news release. It says, I'm the identified decorated Fort Bragg soldier killed in Afghanistan suicide bombing. And that brave warrior was identified as 23-year-old Army Sergeant Ryan Canass, a native of Currytown, Tennessee. When I covered this story initially, I was struck by the young age of the soldier and the things he was able to accomplish in his short military career. I hope his family in Tennessee knows that we, his adopted North Carolina family, that we are so very proud of him. We also learned that Camp Lejeune had also suffered a loss. We learned that a Marine was among those 13 service members killed in that suicide bombing. That Marine was identified as Sergeant Nicole Gee, 23-year-old, hometown Roseville, California. And this probably touched me the most because of her age. And even though she was not the only woman killed in that suicide bombing, she was one of us, and we've taken this time to recognize her. Marine Sergeant Gee was remembered as a humanitarian who went above and beyond to assist the people of Afghanistan during that transition. She had maintained a social media diary of her experiences, and the smile on her face said it all. She loved her job. In September, the news coming out of Camp Lejeune was just shocking. We learned that a Camp Lejeune Marine was shot in the chest during a training exercise in California. That Marine was identified as 24-year-old Lance Corporal Jonathan Barnett, hometown Chattanooga, Tennessee. The death of this Marine left us with a few unanswered questions. We were told this was a dry fire exercise training, which means there was no ammunition involved. And if there was no ammunition, how is it this Marine from Camp Lejeune was shot in the chest and killed? Why is this Marine dead? So many unanswered questions. And in September, that same month, we learned that another Fort Bragg soldier had lost his life. Now, that soldier was identified as 30-year-old Army Sergeant Raymond C. Lopez. Hometown is Fresno, California. Now, this came to light a little bit late because we found that he actually died on September the 13th. It just took a little while before it became public, but we learned that his car ran off the road, caught fire after hitting a tree. And in October, we learned of the death of another soldier involving a military vehicle. This paratrooper was identified as 30-year-old Private First Class Patrick J. Hernandez, hometown Harlingen, Texas. According to news sources, this paratrooper was a military policeman, and he had only been in the military since August of 2020, so he had just been a year and 2 months. Still in October, we learned that another paratrooper was found dead in his off-post apartment. That paratrooper was identified as 35-year-old Sergeant First Class Michael Hamilton, hometown Plano, Texas. We don't know how he died, and we're not going to speculate. In November, we learned that a highly decorated senior enlisted non-commissioned officer had died during physical fitness training. And that Green Beret was identified as Army Sergeant First Class Calvin T. Rockwood, age 38, hometown Jacksonville, Florida. He was a Bronze Star recipient. We should never forget that. And this is a bit of a redemption for me, because when I initially did the story, when it happened in November, I stated his hometown was Jacksonville, North Carolina, and it is indeed Jacksonville, Florida. So I want to thank you to the family members who reached out to me and helped me to recognize my error. Sergeant First Class Calvin T. Rockwood is a native of Jacksonville, Florida. And here you have it, my military 2021 year in review. There were 11 reported deaths from Fort Bragg last year. I may have missed a few from Camp Lejeune, but they did not surface in my research. I promise to do better this year covering what's going on at Camp Lejeune. So the next time you come in contact with a service member, be sure to thank them for their service and their personal sacrifice. And as we venture into 2022, let us pray that there will be less conflict, less military deployment, that our military men and women will feel safe at home, and that those who are casualties of war, that they will continue to receive the health care they deserve. And that's all I have for you right now. Feel free to leave me a comment and let me know what you think about this video. And feel free to like it and to share it. And if you haven't done so already, I want to invite you to subscribe to my channel by clicking on that red subscribe button. It's on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And if you click on this notification bell right here, you'll be the first to know whenever a new video is uploaded. I thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.